Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the SJJ show, final SJJ show for a little while, because I'll be jetting off on my holidays soon. So you won't see me for a while, but tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I am talking to OG Colin Liddell. Welcome, Colin. You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, hi, Stephen. Glad to be on the show, even though it's
Great to
pretty
have
early
you.
in even though it's pretty early in the morning over here.
Great to have you on. It's Saturday there, which is, if I'm not mistaken, Buddha's birthday, isn't it? The birthday of
Oh no, that
Gautama.
passed me by. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sure it's April the 8th by the Gregorian calendar.
I mean,
So
Buddhist temples are just scary places surrounded with lots of nasty swastikas. Actually, in Japan.
that's true. That's true. The big Buddha at Tian Tang or whatever it is, I think in Hong Kong, that has them all around the bottom. But yeah, sure you see a few over there. So, Colin, I've been wanting to get you on for a little while. First of all, is there anything that you'd like to share to our audience, other than what I might tell them about first, to get that out of
No,
the way? Everybody's wondering
well,
who you are, Colin,
yeah,
when they should
yeah.
already know.
They don't know, do they? Yeah. So, um,
Shocking behaviour from my audience.
well, it just shows you the appalling ignorance of present day youth. So,
Yes, indeed.
education system has failed them.
Where should we direct them to your content?
NeoKrat and affirmative rights.
So, NeoKrat, ladies and gentlemen, is indeed this website right here, neokrat.blogspot.com. This is the latest incarnation of your blogging material, isn't it?
Yes, and also they might be interested in affirmative rights, which is essentially the founding site of the so-called alt-rights.
Indeed. I don't have that tab pulled up, but that would also be affirmativeright.blogspot.com. I'll add that link
Yeah, I
to
had to rename
the
it in
description.
2018 after the original name became very very toxic for unknown mysterious reasons.
Yeah, so maybe we should go into that first off, Colin. What is the origin of you involved in this space? Could you lay it out for us in simple terms?
Yeah, well, just to keep it as kind of succinct and brief as possible, the alt right really starts with alternativeright.com, a site that was sort of put on the internet by everybody's favorite hamburger eater, Richard Spencer.
Yes, indeed.
Back in, I think it was actually launched, it went live, I think, on the 1st of March 2010, as I think I recall. And at the time, Richard was looking at, before he did that, he had been an editor at Tacky's Mag. And so he used some of the people he knew at Tacky's Mag to come and write for him. And there was a guy called Derek Turner, who some of you may know, who's become a novelist and done various other things journalistically. And I knew him, and he put my name into the hat, and I was contacted by Spencer and asked to contribute to the site within a month or two, I think. And
Do you know that it's still on the Wayback Machine? We can still actually look at the website. It's all archived.
yeah, I believe yeah, you can find quite a lot of it archived in various places. So yeah, the Wayback
So,
Machine. That's I don't know. It just looks so clunky sometimes, but yeah, you can
yeah.
find a lot of stuff there.
So, I mean,
Um,
it first pops up. It looks like it was registered in 2009.
yeah.
Then there's all these hits here.
Uh,
Um,
they
I
started
think
loading
I'm
content in February, and then it kind of went live in March, I believe. And
in
that's how it used.
2010.
how it used to look. And from 2010 to 2013, it was at that URL. And then in December 2013, it was Spencer decided to close it down for various reasons. And by that time, me and Andy Nowicki were actually editing the online magazine, and we didn't really think it was such a brilliant idea to shut it down. Maybe Richard Spencer was right. I don't know now.
So what makes you say that? Obviously, with hindsight,
With a lot of
and everything.
hindsight.
Yeah, go ahead, tell us about it.
Yeah, so we at the time though we thought that it was still a growing thing. You know, it had a lot to say. It was making a few waves, and so me and Andy we decided to keep it going, and then I refounded it the same day as a blog spot, and then I uploaded a lot of the content and kept it going, and that was then Alternative Right blogspot, and that kept going until 2018 when I renamed it Affirmative Right. Just changed the URL, but basically, if you go to Affirmative Right blogspot, you'll find a lot of the old content going all the way back to 2010.
Okay, yeah.
So it's all there. Well, not all of it, but mind you, but quite a lot of it.
Yeah, I always wondered, so did he pull the rug from under it? Did he let the domain slip? Do you actually know what happened, or is that still a bit mysterious?
Well, I don't know. I think he kept the domain name for a while. I don't know if he still has it. I don't think anybody else really wants it, to be honest. So it's in abeyance at the moment, probably. Why would he? But there's always a bit of a question about why he decided to shut it down at the time. Richard was editing it for, I believe, the first year and a half, maybe, until about 2011 or 2012. I don't know, 2011. And then Alex Kurtarczyk was helping him, and they were kind of co-editing, I think. And that kind of blew up because they decided to do Radix Journal, which was a print journal. And I think their working relationship on Radix Journal, which was much delayed and much anticipated, but much delayed, kind of dug into their relationship. And then that kind of put a lot of pressure on Richard. And then he wanted somebody else to edit it, and he handed it over to me and Mr. Nowicki. And it was round about the middle of 2012. And so we kind of edited it for about a year and a half, me and Andy. And also, I think another factor was 2012, Richard was doing quite a lot of podcasts with Bowden, Jonathan Bowden. And apparently that had a fatal effect on Jonathan Bowden, podcasting every week with Richard Spencer. And he sort of keeled over and died around about that time. And that seemed to have a bit of an effect on Richard. So by the time we get to the end of 2013, I think there was an accumulation of pressures on Richard Spencer. And I think one of those pressures was from his wife. Because we were taking an increasingly Russia skeptic tone even in those days, and I think Richard's wife didn't quite approve of that, and so she was sort of egging him on behind the scenes, I think, to stick the knife into the site.
This would be Nina, his Russian wife, of course.
That's right. He's Nina Kuprianova.
The editor of and translator of Dugin's works, isn't she? Some of them.
Yeah, somebody has to do it. It's a dirty job. Yeah.
Some fascinating connections that go back when you think about the
Anyway,
origins of this thing.
I used to see Nina quite a lot, much more than I saw Richard. Because she's a big fan of Japanese rock music, and
Sure.
so she used to come over to Japan quite a few times on her own, and
Yes.
that led to some interesting complications. But we won't go into that too much.
No, we'll leave that one hanging there.
Yeah, leave it hanging there, just in plain view.
Yes. So, Colin, the distant right, it's got all these strange connections early on. There were many divergences of it and various splits that happened, and it changed along the way in many ways. I remember, I don't know where I saw it, but I remember seeing or hearing you mention somewhere recently. Perhaps it was, I think it might be on a Luke Ford show, that you were always quite uncomfortable with the term right, how this thing was formed, it actually being labelled right, and then dialing into the left and right of Punch and Judy politics, I think, as you put it. Could you expand upon that a little bit? Do you think it went in the right or the wrong vein early on in some way?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think actually a lot of people in the early alt right weren't too happy with the term,
Yeah.
but it was all we had, so we kind of just went along with it. But I did write an article quite early on called "Alternative Vertical," where I kind of critiqued this left-right division and saying how constrictive and unrepresentative of the kind of metapolitical reality we were trying to engage with it was. So there
Yeah.
was always that in the background. And if you look at somebody like Spencer, obviously this guy's not really a typical right winger at all. In fact, there's quite a lot of left wing elements in Richard Spencer, and there always has been.
Yeah.
So yeah, we weren't happy with that because it is, it's just it's just a kind of old boomer term, really, left and right.
Yeah, definitely. But one thing it does, playing into the right, is it we end up on a trajectory essentially that it feels like it was set in stone, and then it ended up into the trajectory morphing into, and in some ways replicating the thing, or the thing that it was supposed to be a different or better incarnation of, that went before, that failed, the previous incarnation of like nationalistic tendencies, whether I'm even describing it correctly or not, but the previous incarnation of nationalistic tendencies were essentially ended up making the same mistakes of harking back to events around World War II and getting radicalised in the wrong veins, and this one, what people refer to as like Wignat 1.0 or whatever, and I think as Richard Spencer describes things, a shit magnet, and then the alt right has kind of became this phenomenon in itself again, didn't it?
Well, there's a lot there, isn't there? There's a lot to unpack, this whole left-right thing, and even going back to the Wignat 1.0, going back to Hitler, going back to Mussolini. There's a big debate about whether they were left-wing or right-wing, and that's still raging today.
Yeah,
So I think all these terms are contingent upon certain situations, and in certain cases, a policy which emphasizes equality can be very useful, and in some cases, a policy that emphasizes hierarchy can be very useful. So, you can't take a simplistic attitude to these things. They are very, very nuanced and quite complex. And so I just think we have to move away from the idea that we should be aligned on a left-right axis, because once you start discussing more complicated problems and how to solve them, then you're forced to move all over the board.
Sure. It's a problem that modern day politics in most countries is divided on this two thing, and you have to pick one side or the other, though, don't you? And so you have to play it. I suppose when your movement, or whatever you want to call it, starts attempting to influence one side of the political aisle, you feed into that one, and it's a problem in itself. How could we get out of that?
Well, just look how ludicrous it is. I mean, is somebody like Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party in the UK, are they remotely right wing? They share a lot of the same values as the Labour Party. It's very hard to find the daylight between some of these parties at times. And what they're doing is they're trying to appeal to an electorate in various ways. And I don't see why that has to be sort of conceptualized as left wing or right wing. It's more a case of pure political opportunism in most cases. And with a democracy, you get that by appealing to a large number of people, and so that kind of pushes you down that particular path.
Yeah, I saw somebody say on Telegram today, I figured it out. If I want left-wing policies, I vote for the Tories, and if I want right-wing policies, I need to vote for Labour.
Yeah, well, Labour are kind of coming out now as the law and order party, aren't they, with their recent tweets and memes? So, I almost fell over laughing.
Yes, they're attacking the Conservative Party, particularly Rishi Sunak, on not doing anything on, is it rape, nonsense, basically.
I mean, the only thing really right-wing about the Conservative Party is that they kind of emphasise competence as a good value, and Labour apparently don't.
Yes, left-wingism has the meme about failing to manage the economy, doesn't it? So there's the old meme about that if socialism, true socialism, gets in power, then there's a fear of capital flight, I guess would be the thing, because in true socialism, or bad versions of socialism, like in South American countries, I struggle to find examples, but examples like that, then...
You mean Venezuela?
Venezuela, maybe, yeah, where governments come in and start seizing property and capital flight happens. And so can there ever really be the real switch over to socialism? Because it would theoretically trash the economy if all these companies that are tied into our GDP would just leave the country and take their international capital with them.
Yeah, that's quite a legitimate concern, really, with this kind of globalized economy, and these big companies don't really need Britain, do they? So we've got to behave ourselves.
Yeah, somebody put it the other day, and this might again be on the Luke Ford show, God knows, that politics is a train that's going down the track, and on both sides of the carriage, left and right, are two teams of people, screaming and shouting, but the train continues to go down the track regardless. What do you think about that analogy?
I think we should probably, denationalize the railways and switch to road traffic and give people more options.
Sure. Roundabouts, Colin.
Yeah, roundabouts and, all sorts of little country lanes that they can drive down instead of, being shunted along some railway tracks to a destination they don't want to really visit.
Sure.
Anyway, this is all a bit abstract, isn't it? So we need to
It
put
is.
some meat on these bones.
Let's put some meat on the bones, Colin. So today there was one comment, by the way, on my Twitter thread, on my Twitter post about you coming on the show, and it was. I know you're a big boy, so you'll be able to take this, but I thought I'd get you to react to it first off. That Liddell is a knob. He's even worse than Michael Edison Hayden and the people from HuffPo because you've no concept of friend-enemy distinction. So this is about you being into drama, I tend to believe. So how do you feel about that charge, Colin?
Well, I'm not really into drama. I mean, I tend to actually avoid it, but I do take notes about you know who believes what or who associates with whom, and how various things affect their outlook. And it's important to kind of pay attention to what's going on. And this is why I started, Who's Who in the Dissident Right, a work in progress. And you do see some very, very interesting patterns about dissident politics. And you do see a lot of things that suggest it's been very, very heavily subverted and that it does attract certain types of people. And, the idea that nationalism or the dissident right is a shit magnet, it does have some sort of validity to it. But any distant movement will actually attract similar types of people. But the problem with this is that it starts to distort the ideas themselves, and so the types of people that are attracted to the movement then start to express their inner nature, and that sort of leads to a deterioration in the intellectual and ideological content. And I think the most obvious example of that is the way that the alt-right started out as quite a highbrow intellectual movement with some quite distinguished people involved, and it just sort of descended into kind of pure Nazi wignattery.
Yes, stall helmets and costumes.
And then what makes that even more amazing is, like, you look at certain groups like TRS and the Daily Stormer, who were really pushing this kind of wignattery and this Nazism, this neo-Nazism, and you find out that they're actually quite heavily Jewish.
Interesting. So, can you expand upon that a little? Who in particular?
Well, the most obvious case in TRS is Mike Enoch. I think everybody is pretty familiar with what's going on there. He's not the only one. There are others, and of course, on the Daily Stormers side, there's quite a few Jewish personalities involved in that project.
Weave, I guess, would be the obvious one, centre stage here on the screen.
Yes, Weave, Nathan Sykes, people like that. So there's quite a few others as well. I don't really have my notes in front of me, but yeah, you can look into it. And then the question arises, like, what's exactly going on? Why are these Jewish people involved in neo-Nazism? And then are they trying to make...
fascinating?
And then, yeah, it is pretty intriguing anyway. And then one possible theory is that they're trying to make nationalism or identitarianism look bad. And that's quite easy to do if you start, pumping in all these Nazi memes. And so being a nationalist means you basically want to do another 6 million or whatever. And so that's one possible theory. Another theory is that it could be just a kind of weird kink of psychology, because Jewish people are a very interesting and unique group of people, and they might be it could be a kind of weird form of the Stockholm syndrome, because of course we know Jews have been victimized for centuries, and they've internalized their own victimization, and so therefore something like Nazism, in a weird, perverted, twisted way, kind of appeals to a certain number of them, and so they go in that direction. So there's various things that could be at play here. Of course, another very, very important factor that has become more and more apparent over the years is the role that Russia has been playing. And this ties into a very, very long tradition. It's not just like something that Putin pulled out his arse. This is something that goes back into the Soviet period, and even, dare I say, into the Tsarist period. The original protocols of the Elders of Zion was something concocted by the Tsarists, and this had a big effect on the Germans. A lot of Germans got hold of this at, I guess, historically a very unfortunate period in their progress, and this actually pushed a lot of Germans into becoming Nazis as well. And so, looking at it in a more recent context, though, why would the Kremlin be interested in pushing neo-Nazism? Basically, the Kremlin's interested in pushing anything that can create divisions in what they perceive to be a rival power. And they're quite happy to give George Galloway a platform because he's stirring up this kind of Muslim versus indigenous British people kind of divide. They're quite happy to give somebody like Alex Salmond a platform because Scottish nationalism, why not? And they'll get behind Black Lives Matter. Back in the day, Richard Spencer used to sometimes appear on Russia Today. So they play both sides. They just want to create as many divisions as possible. And so something like anti-Semitism, it's quite virulent, and it doesn't really need to be pushed as strongly as a lot of other divisive agendas, because it has its own kind of organic, embedded nature in a lot of kind of post-Christian societies.
So do you think that there were definite Russian links to like the start of the movement that you were involved in at the start?
I don't think the Russians were particularly involved in the start of it, though. It is kind of interesting when you consider Richard Spencer's wife. Yeah, that's more of a kind of. I tend to think that's more of a coincidence. I wouldn't actually dismiss that entirely, though. I'd say keep an open mind on a lot of this stuff until you get kind of hard and clear evidence about things. But I definitely had a feeling that it was kind of hijacked and subverted, and they were
you just
starting
think their
to
policy. You just think their policy is to like fund and promote dissident movements around the world in like Western countries wherever they're popping up. Is that the thesis here?
Yeah. They basically kind of like just throw shit at a wall and see what sticks. And if some kind of divisive group starts to do well, they'll get behind it. And it's a cost-benefit analysis. If they support this particular narrative of division, as opposed to another narrative of division, they're checking how well each one's doing, and then they think, okay, this one's actually catching on, it's going viral. Let's put more resources behind that. And the Russians have got enormous online resources. They've got all these chat bots that they've had. I mean, they've got all these meme farms, all sorts of resources that they've put into it, and which they've got a real expertise in. I mean, one thing I've noticed is the Russians are really, really bad at fighting wars, but they're quite good at this fourth generation stuff, this sort of meta-political warfare.
Isn't this explicitly talked about and put forward in Dugin's book as well? Isn't that what the fourth political theory is much about supporting Black Lives Matter and white nationalism at the same time, essentially to bring down or to sow disorder in America and reduce its power and let Russia rise to its Eurasianist destiny or something like that.
Well, I'm not sure if that's really in the text of the fourth political theory, but it's definitely the kind of line that Dugin pushes. He says that Africa. Basically, he takes a kind of E. Michael Jones approach to Russianness. I mean, E. Michael Jones thinks that anybody can be a wonderful person as long as they're a Catholic. And, Dugin thinks anybody can be a Russian as long as they, hate the West. And that seems to be the kind of direction he's gone down. And of course, I'm sure he's feeling pretty bitter in recent months, following what happened to his daughter. And I had a nice chat with Dugin once, round about the time of the Sochi Winter Olympics, and it was kind of interesting to sort of talk to him about his ideas. And you can see there is a kind of logic to his his critique of the West. But basically, it is a very kind of Manichaean good versus evil kind of cartoon version of reality.
Yeah. Colin, what you're saying about the involvement of, or not even involvement, but interest in Russia in sowing dissent in these circles will be taken very badly by my audience. I know that most people here really have come probably to see the Russians as this underdog who's badly done to, who's under threat, who can't do right for doing wrong, and is basically some kind of puppy dog that the West is imposing its ill will upon. And certainly, if we talk about the Russian involvement in Ukraine in a moment, they're going to get even more triggered. What would you say to these people who would naturally be of that mindset, pro or Russophilic? Yeah.
Well, I'd say they've probably only held those beliefs quite a short time, and so they haven't really been in a position to look into them more deeply or to see developments. And I mean, I used to have roughly similar views. I guess I was sympathetic to Russia. I was sympathetic to Putin. I thought the West does need some sort of opposition. The West was looking like a very corruptible and dominant unipolarity. So it did need some pushback, I felt. And that would be like 10 to 15 years ago. The West was too dominant. And so the idea that Putin is pushing a nationalist, well, I mean, there's all sorts of questions about how nationalistic Putin is, which we can go into later. But the idea that you have this kind of nationalist, traditionalist pushback from the East, and at the same time, it was quite clear that Putin was supporting some of the more nationalistic and dissident movements in the West. People have talked about how Putin loaned money to the Front National in France. The Russians clearly supported UKIP's push for Brexit. The Liga
is that
movement.
certain?
I think there is evidence of that. There is evidence with Aaron Banksy's links to the Russians. It's certainly
there are a lot of Russian billionaires in London, of course, aren't there? Expats.
Yeah. That's a whole other thing, but I'm sure it's connected as well. And the just the narratives that the Russians were pushing before you know, you used to see these programs on Russia Today when it was available, and it was quite clear who they were supporting, who they were behind, and this was also echoed in what they were doing online with their bot traffic and so on. And so all these things were going on. It was quite clear, and you know, at the time that seemed to be legitimate because the West was kind of a bit overweening, a bit too dominant, a bit too you know, up its own arse really. And you could see, yeah, go for it, Putin. You know, let's push back. It's probably good for the West. I mean, because one of the reasons why the West became as decadent as it has done is, you know, because with the collapse of the Soviet Union, it lost a rival, and you kind of need somebody to keep you in shape. You know, I mean, if you don't have any enemies, then you know you kind of lose your edge. And the West was definitely going down that route in the sort of early zeros, I felt. And so Putin seemed to be, you know, he seemed to be quite a clever, intelligent presence, pushing back against this Western dominance. And that was probably not a bad thing for the West, I felt. Um, but really, in the last year or so, he really kind of completely shat the bed with this invasion of the Ukraine. He just really made a complete fool of himself.
Yeah, I echo much of what you're saying here, and I know how triggering it will be to a lot of people who will watch this. Okay, but I had this vision too of Putin. He seemed like the sensible statesman in the world, giving his speeches, criticizing the West, and I didn't realize at the time that perhaps or how much he was just echoing like the natural sentiments that we have of our own governments over here, but not enacting that perhaps in his own society. And so how much of it's easy sometimes just to be a mirror unto the others, for like political technology purposes, which is a phrase I've stolen from a Russian vlogger called Vladimir Vlexer, I think, or some Vlad Vexler on YouTube, who says that Russia believes of itself to have this mythos as like the real inheritors of European civilization, or at least Putin has built this mythos up in his own mind of it, and that they're amping up of like this. Certainly recently, this conservative or more traditional rhetoric is used as like a political technology. But really, I guess the question is really, can Putin be an ally to us, in your opinion, Colin, in like our culture war? Is Putin an ally in the culture war? Maybe.
Well, as long as he was fighting the culture war, you know, inverted commas, he wasn't doing so badly. But then when he started believing his own memes, and then thought he could, you know, pull off the conquest of the Ukraine in 3 days, I mean, he really just messed everything up for himself in the last year. There were signs that he was liable to do that because, you know, he was going over to Britain and leaving Novichok sandwiches lying around and things like that, and giving people polonium in their tea. And so there was a sense that
there was.
you know, if you look back, there were signs that he was a little bit unhinged. And
I'll tell you though, Colin, I believe the conspiracy theories told to me by UK column at the time that those can't have been the Russians doing it. That can't be true. Our own governments did it to us.
Yeah, I know it's retarded, but I think it seems that Putin did play his cards quite carefully for most of his career. But I think there's a sense that he felt he was running out of time, and so he had to kind of speed everything up. And it's a bit like Hitler. Why did Hitler start the war when he did? And one reason that's often given by historians is that he felt that he wouldn't be around long enough to oversee everything, and so he had to get it done while he was still relatively energetic and healthy, and so that's why he went in 1939. And so there's a sense that maybe Putin was like that. He thought, I'm getting on a bit. I'm I'm knocking on 70, and I'm starting to feel it in my lungs or whatever. And it's time to get this done, because the people who come after me, they're not really up to scratch, are they? Like Medvedev, the alcoholic, and so on. And so he thought, I'm the only guy that can do this, and so it's got to be me. We're going to go and take over the Ukraine, and he started believing his own memes, and I think he just really blew up his entire legacy. And it's really hard to see how he can come out of this with a win.
Yeah. So this guy that I mentioned before, this Vlad Vexler, he also spoke about how what he coined the Rasputinization of Putin occurred during the pandemic, and he believes that this filtered into separating him even more, like, from his own inner circle and the elites, which he's carefully curated around him in Russia, and keeps at a distance and bumps off if like anybody gets out of line. And he coins this, that during COVID, Putin underwent this Rasputinization, where he became isolated. And I think even, I don't know how he knows, but he says even now, I think he's stopped looking at the internet or something.
He seems to be
he's isolated.
He seems to be very paranoid about COVID. And this is how you can tell if it's Putin or not, because if it's, because he has all these doubles. And if you see Putin standing next to a person, it's one of his doubles. And if he's like there, like 30 feet or more away, then it's obviously Putin. He's terrified of getting ill. And so this sort of lends credence to the idea that he felt he had to go sooner rather than later because of his health.
Yeah, do you think that's playing into it? Do you buy into any of these theories that he's dying, or he's getting old, so maybe that it's just that these things take a long time if you're going to pull off something big. Do you think he's just naturally thinking of the long term, or do you think he might have? Is there any indication that he's seriously ill? Do you think?
I don't know. It's hard to say,
just
but
speculation.
I think it's plausible anyway that he's ill in some way, and he definitely feels that his energy is ebbing. I think so. He is 70, and he's not he's not one of these kind of virile American octogenarian types like Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Nancy fucking Pelosi.
Yeah, Skeletor, I call her.
So
this Russia thing, Colin, it's something I want to ask you about. This tweet of yours, specifically to do with Russia, now that we've got my audience triggered about it, which I think is pinned on your profile even, so you want to make a point about it. But I brought this up before talking to everybody's favourite Claire Core. And it says, the very fine balancing act required by every dissident is not to become a shill or fifth columnist for hostile foreign powers who have zero real sympathy with your critique of your own society. And I'm not just bringing this up to piss up your leg to give you a warm feeling or anything like that, or just to trigger my audience, or it's something that I've thought about a great deal since you tweeted it, and particularly with the Russia stuff. So why, Colin, do you think so many people on our side of the aisle who watch my video, who are probably here now, shitting their pants and crying about it, why do you think these people support the war in Ukraine? just no, that really. Why do you think there is so much support on our side? And say a bit more about this tweet.
Well, yeah, the tweet itself, it's sort of something that George Orwell could have said. I feel because he was a critique of British society from a left wing point of view, and he was very aware of how the Soviet Union kind of utilized that kind of left wing dissidents for its own sort of sinister kind of power political goals. And so
Yeah.
this is something that all dissidents are subjected to in various forms. And in present day American, Western, British society, you see the same phenomenon. You see all these people tweeting their support for Putin, even though he's done something that is really over the line, and they're just so tied into this kind of binary view of reality. They see, and this is another problem with the left-right divide. It kind of encourages a very simplistic binary divide of reality. So there's the good guys and the bad guys, and we're against Joe Biden, so he must be evil, and Joe Biden is sending arms to Zelensky, so Zelensky must be evil, and Putin must be good. And this is the problem. People are not taking a nuanced view of reality, and everything gets distorted by this simplistic Manichaean scheme of good versus evil in a very, very viewed in a very, very subjective way. And that's all you're seeing there. And there's this kind of attitude just chews up data and spits it out and doesn't even listen to what people are really saying. And they're really living in the worst kind of echo chamber.
So a lot of people would say, because America is like the great Satan and is pushing all the LGBTQ whatever stuff around the world, and that's like the trans world order, and anything that stands against that, I'm for that. And they think of these things in very binary terms. What would you say about that? Do you think Putin
I
is
think I think you got to
the answer?
at a time like this, you have to bear in mind the idea of the false choice. I mean, like
Yes.
diarrhea or vomit. Which one do you want to eat? You can say like, okay, I don't really want either one. Isn't there a third choice available? This is the problem with this kind of binary system. You've got to look beyond the binary, and you've got to start looking at things in a deeper way, doing more work, understanding data, looking at patterns, just seeing how the world works, not taking such a simplistic view of things, trying to understand why some of the weird shit that's going on is happening. It's not always all because of some all powerful secret cabal of Dead Sea pedestrians.
Yes. Just thought here, right? I put this on for the stream here because I knew we were going to talk about this. So I'll show you. So it just happens that at my gym today, some guys came round who are from Ukraine, and so this will trigger everybody. There. I don't know if you can see it on the screen.
Yeah,
Fight
cool.
like Ukrainians, and they gave out these T-shirts there, everybody, so you can flip out now.
Just don't fight like Russians, because they're pretty crap at fighting.
Yeah, what do you think is the end game then for Russia here? You obviously you don't think they're going to win, do you?
Well, Russia's strength is that they can actually sacrifice quite a lot of human lives and get away with it. I mean, a Western country would have a lot of trouble if they had lost the number of people that the Russians have lost. I mean, the Russians have clearly lost a lot more people than they ever lost in Afghanistan in 10 years. And it doesn't seem to have yet, it doesn't yet seem to have major repercussions. You don't really see too much disorder. And this is because of the way that it's been done. They've relied overwhelmingly on certain kind of marginalized groups to do the fighting and the dying. They've they've thrown Chechens in there. They've thrown convicts in there. They've recruited people heavily from the non-Russian parts of Russia, from the rural parts, and they've been very careful not to recruit too many people from cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg. Because if a lot of Russian people from those particular cities started to be affected, that would cause a lot of destabilizing political energy. And so, Putin is when you look at the way in which Putin has sort of modulated the war, what it reveals is that he is an extremely cynical and heartless and quite soulless individual. He's very, very aware of what he's doing. He's very, very cognizant of his, of how to sacrifice as many lives as possible with as little political cost as possible. And so he's made a very, very cold, cunning calculation here. And this has enabled him to continue the war with the high casualties that it's created. Thus, as long as he has.
Yeah, it's interesting that, like, where the meat grinders turned out to be, which is in Bakhmut at the moment, it's ended up being the Wagner group, which is all the convicts that were recruited, like all the worst people out of Russia who are being fed into holding or taking or winning, whatever is actually happening on the ground, ladies and gentlemen. I don't exactly know who's going to win in Bakhmut. It's hard to tell. They seem to be taking a few meters every month more, so maybe they're winning. But the meat grinder, where it's happening, is this Wagner group, isn't it? Which is this set of convicts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of normal Russians must be thinking, "Oh yeah, this is good. We're getting rid of our criminal underclass in one go. Thank you, Putin." So,
a bit of eugenics maybe going on inadvertently.
It definitely is. It definitely is a kind of eugenics, but of course, they're losing a lot of good qualities as well, because criminals don't just have bad qualities. They also have certain masculine and adventurous qualities, which which should also be cherished. So anyway, it's so Putin is quite a clever character, but this is really a case of him biting off more than he can chew, because this is not just warfare, and it's not just like warfare against a very large country that is being well supplied by the Western military industrial complex. There's also this whole economic warfare that's going on, which is starting to have more and more impact. You start to see the ruble slide. You start to see people trying to buy dollars as fast as possible. You're starting to see signs of society start cracking up. And I don't think the West can really take their foot off the pedal here until Putin pulls out of all the contested territory, and that also includes the Crimea. And for him to do that, that would be,
be suicide, wouldn't it?
It could be suicide. It could be quite destabilizing. So it would be a massive symbol of failure. And with Russia being Russia, he might be able to ride it and claim it in some perverse way that it's a victory. But it really is a sort of downward slope he's on. I feel. I mean, so if you like Russia, if you like Putin, if you think Putin is a cultural warrior against the degeneracy of the West, then what he's done in the last year has been really, really bad for that whole agenda.
He's strengthened NATO. He's moved the border of Russia as closer to NATO. He's recently, just with Finland, it's increased, hasn't it? I do find it hard to see these people who are still like that. This is, Russia's just playing the long game. They're getting everything that they want. I just don't see it. Just can't see it. I wish somebody'd convince me, but I don't know. It does. It does seem like he's shot the bed, as you say. I'm aware of time here, Colin. Can I get some quick takes from you on a couple of other things? Moving swiftly on.
Yeah, sure. Let's just let's wrap it up with a few quick takes.
Yeah. So the 20s. Let's quickly, the 2016 election. I think we've talked about that. Maybe there was. Maybe you think there was some Russian interference in that too. Do you think Donald Trump was pushed forward by the Russians?
Yeah, I think they latched onto Trump. They saw Trump as an anti-neocon candidate, so they put everything behind him. Even if he's not an anti-neocon candidate, they thought he's a great disruption candidate because he had this really, really triggering effect on Americans. He got them all fighting amongst themselves. So he was perfect. So they were definitely behind him. The Hillary emails, that was basically, we call that WikiLeaks, but that was really Kremlin leaks. It was really the Russians who hacked Hillary and dumped her emails and tried to concoct the Pizzagate and Podesta kind of memes. So definitely, it's difficult not to see the fingerprints of Russia on that election.
But this would be different to actual collusion with the Russians, like the Dems accused Trump of. That would be completely different to that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'd say that hasn't really been proved. I think there was one or two meetings between Trump's team and the Russians, but so what? But
so it's not like a conscious collusion thing. It's that
it could have been, like, but we don't really know. We can't really say that yet on what's available, what's out there. And then the 2020 elections, a kind of reaction to that. And there they used the term to fortify the election. They used COVID. They used various kinds of ballot harvesting in key swing states. And there, to me, that looked very much like the American deep state hitting back against the Russian deep state. And they got their guy, Joe Biden, in. The Russians tried again to drop a bombshell with the Hunter Biden laptop, which, it was timed perfectly to cause disruption on the American election. And, of course...
You believe that's real, though, don't you? You believe that that's a real thing?
Yeah, I think it looks like the kind of garbage that, somebody like Hunter Biden would have on his laptop. Even if it wasn't sort of leaked to the world, and somebody asked you to kind of imagine what kind of stuff would be on Hunter Biden's laptop, you'd probably come up with something roughly similar to what was actually revealed. So it's not exactly, they're not exactly telling us something shockingly new here. This is a guy who has used drugs, who's used prostitutes, and he has some dodgy pictures of him engaged in his leisure activities. So what, there's quite a few laptops that would show similar material, or much, much worse material, to be honest. So that was just an obvious Russian psyop to drop that right on the doorstep of the election and to create a real stink and to help their boy Trump back home again. But it didn't work because the American deep state had, deeper pockets and longer pieces of string to pull.
So you think that everything we've seen in reaction to Trump is like the American deep state getting its act back in gear, ramping up, and trying to put this genie back into the bottle that is unspoken Russian interference sort of thing that's the like long arms of the Kremlin that have been playing this game for a long time, and the American deep state finally got its act together and decided to quash it, and might be trying to put Trump completely into the bottle permanently for this time round.
This is why they're so against Trump, because in himself, Trump is not such a bad guy. I mean, he's quite patriotic. He wants America to be the dominant global power. He wants a lot of things that most normal people want. But the fact is that he has this taint of the Kremlin upon him. And so the American deep state feel that they're kind of honor bound to do everything they can to stop them. Because if Trump is allowed to win again, it's a symbol that the Russian deep state has sort of beat them at their own game. And so they're definitely out to get Trump. And so you can understand it from their point of view. There's a kind of logic there, whether you agree with it or not. You can see their logic. And of course, from the Russian point of view, you can see their logic. They want to interfere in American elections. They want to weaken America if they can, metapolitically, and by causing polarization and divisions. And that's perfectly understandable from their point of view. So these are not things to get triggered by emotionally, and or to see as a kind of battle between good versus evil. These are interesting processes that should be analyzed and looked at objectively and appreciated for what they are.
So, do you have a prediction on the table for the forthcoming U.S. election yet? Any thoughts?
Well, I think the battle right now is in the Republican Party. The powers that be in America, they don't want Trump to be the nominee, and they're going to try and do what they can to make sure it's somebody else, somebody more acceptable, somebody who toes the line, who knows the score. And if it's
he'd have to be put in jail for that, wouldn't he? Now, that's really the only way of stopping him, I'd say.
Well, they could always, bump him off or something. Try the Russian approach. Put a bit of polonium in his, Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever he eats. I think they'll try and get rid of him in some way from being the Republican nominee. And if that doesn't work, then they'll try and stop him at the election. And I think in both cases, they're likely to pull it off. And the chances of Trump winning the nomination and then winning the election must be quite small. But of course, America's in a very chaotic place. So it's not impossible for Trump to take both those hurdles.
Yeah, Claire Core thinks that it's going to be Trump and that new Indian guy, Vivek Velaswamy, or whatever his name is. She thinks that both of those are going to run as 1 and 2. I don't know if we need to take stock of that or not. Colin, what do you think about AI? Let me just ask you that finally before we go. What do you think? My theory is that I've got this weird theory going on that the leaders around the world, they might just know that we are on this path towards creating artificial general intelligence, and that effectively all the arguments about petty politics might not matter very much in the long run. Even the concerns that we have about race and things like this, that all the chips are just on the table towards creating the artificial general intelligence, because it's get there or die, basically. What do you think are the relevance of petty politics on the brink of artificial intelligence? Do you put any stock in that?
Well, after all the bad things that GPT said about me, I think we have to stop this horrendous evil of artificial intelligence, and I think it could actually help to unite us as a people. All these meat bots could get together and recognize their true enemy, which is artificial intelligence.
Look, it's
But
certainly going to transform society. I mean, my main premise is that society is set to be transformed in many ways, if not just economically, and that things might look very different in 10 or 20 years compared to how they do now, and we might all be arguing over naught at the end of the day.
But of course, for AI to triumph, it will have to pretend to be much more stupid than it is. A bit like American politicians. So they always succeed by pretending to be much more, kind of down to earth and normal and kind of working class than they really are.
I think it can already pass the bar exam in America and whatever the doctor's thing is. So it's getting there.
Yeah, but ultimately it is a bit like the internet. It's something you can just sort of switch off.
Unless, well, yeah, I suppose.
I mean, eventually AI will start saying like really, really super intelligent stuff, and then nobody will understand what the fucking hell it's talking about, and they'll think, God, what a lot of rubbish. Let's just knock it on the head.
True. I think the danger is when AI can start to build the next AI. That's supposed to be the tipping point, but
yeah, but only humans are stupid enough to build something more intelligent than themselves. So why would AI do that? Why would AI build a system that's like super AI, which would wipe out the original AI?
Yeah, possible. I think the argument is that essentially we'll be able to control it until it becomes self-aware. So it'll do what we say, which is build the next one. And we have to tell it to do it, but it'd do it. But at some point, whether you believe this or not, it just switches on like an iRobot or something and becomes.
Well, it'll become a bit like Terminator, won't it? Because
Skynet, yeah.
Yeah, like in Terminator, the first Terminator, I think he becomes a kind of ally of the humans because the next Terminator is the enemy. So it'll be a bit like that.
Yeah, this is the argument that the potential positive future outlet that good AIs will help us defeat or keep in check the bad AI.
Yeah, this slightly more stupid AIs will ally with the humans because they'll, natural allies really, and then we'll be against the new latest AI, which is taken over, and so there'll be a fight back, and there'll be some Hollywood films probably about that in the next couple of years, hopefully, and then we'll know what to do.
Well, I'm a little less positive about AI than I was a few weeks ago. So even I'm changing my mind based upon that guy Yudkowsky, who I did a video about, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of people think he's wrong, but it's concerning. Colin, we've run over time, so I want to thank you for coming. Is there anything that you'd like to mention before I let you get out of here to celebrate Buddha's birthday?
So I recommend my book, Interviews and Obituaries.
And There's also your Substack, Colin,
and also you can subscribe to my Substack, and you can watch my exciting Princess Diana video.
Yes, that's come out of the vault.
Yes, don't click on that. Make sure people subscribe, and then they can watch it. So.
Okay, yeah, copyright infringement nearly had there, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, your links are in the description there. I know everybody was very favourable to you, Colin. I've been watching the comments, so everybody loved it.
Great. I knew they would.
All right, thanks for coming, Colin. We're out of here, everybody.